All right, hey everybody, we are officially live. Dun dun dun. I feel like we need music or something in the background so it can be a full experience. Okay, so I'm just pulling it up on my phone so we can see all the juicy comments that are going to be coming through. But hi everyone, welcome. We are so excited to be with you today on this Thursday. The weather is wild, okay, but we are here intact, thankfully, and excited to be having some real talk with you all and also with each other. I'm so excited to be learning from Irving and also Axel. We're gonna have juicy combos, so get ready. And also, if you are here already, go ahead and drop a little hello in the chat. We love to say hi and welcome you to this space. So welcome. Again, I see some students are joining, so we're so excited to have you here. So we're gonna go ahead and start with introductions, and then we're gonna dive into our juicy conversation today, which is all about civic engagement and Latinx youth identity, et cetera, et cetera. So, but getting very personal with you all and sharing our journeys as well. So to start us off with the introductions, anybody want to go first? I'm like, dun, dun, dun. Maybe Irving, if you're open to it.
I thought Axel was going to go first.
Okay, Axel, you can go first. Let's put Axel back on the spot. Axel, it's you. It's all you.
Los más jovencitos. Well, it's great to be here. Okay, I'll go first and introduce myself. Okay, so my name is Axel Herrera. I am an immigrant from Honduras, and I've lived in North Carolina most of my life. I came to the US when I was 7 years old, back in 2005, and basically moved to North Carolina that same year later on after living in New York for a few months. But this is home. I went to my hometown. I technically call Durham, North Carolina, but I am currently living in Sampson County right now where I'm working. And yeah, so I went to high school all over North Carolina, but I went to high school in Durham, and I actually attended Duke University right after high school in Durham. So it's kind of even much more why it is my hometown. And some facts about me, I guess quick thing, I was born in Honduras, but honestly, I consider myself more of like a Latino immigrant living in the US. I think that's the experience that I relate to more. And then kind of being like more like a pan Latino, to be honest, like ni de aquí ni de allá. And then just my stepdad is Mexican. My youngest sister is a Mexican and Honduran American. So yeah. And then another quick thing, I watch a ton of YouTube and it's one of the things that I like enjoy, and some of the things that I get to escape, out of a lot of the things that we are experiencing or living through right now.
Thank you so much, Juicy. I'm excited to hear more about your story and also your work. Can't wait. So Irving, can you take us next?
Sí, yeah, listo. I am ready with my cafecito. I'm drinking some iced coffee because I love iced coffee. I'm addicted. So cheers to Axel and Eden. And thank you for having me today. Such an honor. I've been watching the cafecitos, the past cafecitos, and I'm like, I want to be in them. And then I saw your email inviting me, and I was very, very happy about this. So I am Irving Zabaleta. I use he and él pronouns. I was born in the state of Veracruz, Mexico. So soy jarocho, orgullosamente. I came to the US with my mom and my younger sister, Cynthia, at the age of 13. I was turning 14, actually, to Burlington, North Carolina, where I still reside. And as soon as I got here, I was placed into ninth grade. So just imagine a younger version of myself at almost 14 with no English, a school of about 1,200 students. And at that time in 2020 years ago, only like 20 Latinx students. So it was very, very challenging. But nonetheless, I'm here. I am committed to kind of helping my people. And when I say my people, I do not only reference the Latinx community, but also the queer community and just the immigrants in general, regardless of country of origin. So I am very excited to be here and sharing a little bit of my journey and how I got more involved in civic engagement. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you. Well, I'm so excited for this conversation. I'll introduce a little bit about myself and say hello to people in the chat already. We have a lot of people joining us. So hi everyone, my name is Elaine Townsend Uten. I was born in Peru, and that's where I was born. I came over though when I was really young to the US, and in particular the South. So was raised in Georgia, Arkansas, and North Carolina. And North Carolina has been home for the longest, specifically Waxhaw, Union County, got to represent my 2 stoplight town. And that's it, really those rural spaces in the US very much raised me. And that's also, I think, probably unpack this a little bit more, but I think it definitely impacted my perspective as a young person in civic engagement. And also, I think definitely the beginning, not feeling really engaged because of not feeling like I belonged. And that's largely due to being raised in predominantly white spaces, and then also not having representation in school settings, in particular when it came to educators that could identify with my background and be able to connect to that in more of the public or, learning spaces. But home was different, and so I'll unpack a little bit about that. I'm the oldest of 6 kids too, and I feel like my siblings have taught me a lot also about civic engagement, so excited to kind of share a little bit of what I've learned through them. But I'm also first gen in a lot of different ways, but first gen college student in particular. Woo, the light just hit me, y'all. Wow. Okay. But I'm also, so that was my journey too, being the first to go to college and the first to do a lot of things that have also mobilized me and my family too. So it's been a lot of learning, a lot of newness, and excited to unpack that with you both today, and also our audience. So welcome people. We have Jennifer with us, and Elena and Eric. Thank you for coming through. Jasmine is here, and Anna and Brian. Okay, the whole crew is showing up. Okay, Parker, and hey, Beatriz. Let's go. Wow. Okay, Valentina, welcome. Y'all, we're so excited to have you join this conversation. So please be dropping whether you have questions or your reflections or something that one of us says resonates with you. We want to know. Thank you for joining and engaging with us. So before we start in getting into our guiding questions that we have prepared for today's conversation, we want to give you a crash course on Latinx Ed, and also the work that we all do in the community, but also professionally. So today I'm representing Latinx Ed. So we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to amplifying the lived experiences of Latinx immigrant families here in North Carolina to break down educational barriers in particular. And so we are manifesting this vision through our several initiatives that focus on positive racial ethnic identity, in particular connecting to Latinidad, but also our respective cultures and where we come from. Also college access, making sure that our Latinx youth have the culturally relevant resources to really be on that journey and be supported and nurtured on that journey to pursuing higher education, and also getting tapped into the resources that they need to also to make it and also to thrive in that environment. And last but not least, shameless plug for the work that we do with also adults to create more inclusive, more equitable learning environments for our youth as they are being raised and hopefully nurtured in our education system. So shameless plug that if our work and also these conversations resonate with you, we'd love for you to join us in this mission and really creating, and also this bold vision for our community to have inclusive and equitable spaces for our youth to be learning and to be growing and to be exercising their leadership skills. And so we're going to unpack how that is all tied into this conversation, but I want to turn over to Axel and then Irving to tell us more about your work and what you're up to as well. Any shameless plugs? Let's go.
Great, thank you. So I'm recently graduated from college. Basically, I finished during this pandemic year, and it was super interesting, but I've been involved mostly with my community starting since high school. But right now, after, Lane talked about being a first generation student, I was as well. And I was trying to find a way where I had done a lot of work in college, but I was missing some of that direct community-based work that I had done during high school and working with community leaders, community organizations. And so I decided to take a service role with Duke College Advising Course. So that's where I am now. And I was lucky enough to, I guess, have some insight from one of my friends who had been attended Duke from a rural community here in Sampson, and she had made it there. And so got some tips from her, be like, hey, where could I, do something that was meaningful for some time and just help students that needed the most. I ended up coming to Sampson County to her old high school, and I am in the majority Hispanic school, which is insane to think about. And it's super small, but like it exists, right? It exists in rural North Carolina, which not even in Durham was a thing. So that's what I'm doing right now, doing college advising. It's a pretty difficult time because, for my siblings and for my younger siblings, for the students I'm working with there's like online, there's like hybrid models. So it's very interesting being back in a high school education type setting and trying to provide resources, but there's a lot of limitations to what we can do for students. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And during this election season, I decided that I definitely wanted to plug in, and we got a plug from Poder en Si Action. One of the organizers, Ileana Santillan, mentioned, hey, we're doing phone banking. And I actually was like, sure, let's get on it. And so it was great to get involved with them for that. But then I expanded and transitioned to helping with their Votemos en Si initiative, which is really like the collaboration of multiple organizations to provide bilingual, I guess, voter literacy and information. And so we've been doing some of those initiatives. We've been, working at the polls with a few volunteers, and I got to do that in Sampson last weekend, and that was amazing. We had some first-time voters from my high school, some first-time family members that came by. So it's been great. And then last thing, working with Nuestro South since my junior year of college. And so Nuestro South, for those that don't know, is like really a project that started of like exploring the Latinx history within the South. I personally didn't know it, and it's been a journey to just see like, hey, we didn't just show up here, right? We've been here for a while. And so that's what we're working on. And we did a podcast, you can check it out, but we're also trying to work on some like social media stuff and a new video series that we're prepping.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for sharing all of that, and turning over to you, Edwin.
Congratulations to Excel for just finishing Duke. That's awesome. Yeah, what a time, for real. Yeah, but nonetheless, it's such a great accomplishment. Well, I want to give a shout out to currently I am working at I'm the communications manager for the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. It's a nonprofit community lawyering organization. So most recently, we have like two teams, the voting rights and the justice system reform teams. The voting rights team is a team that litigates to have access for longer early voting sites. The ruling from the Supreme Court last night in a 5-3 decision where people could, the State Board of Elections here in North Carolina could still accept your ballot as long as it was postmarked on election day on November 3rd. So that's something that our lawyers do. On the social systems reform side, they help people who have been prisonated and who finish probation to get access to voting as well, but also like how to navigate the process after you're out. They also have a consular snack cups initiative in Wake County to try to get the RSOs or the school officers out of the school system. As we know, they mostly target Black and Brown students, and instead try to bring more counselors into and nurses and psychiatrists into the schools. So that's what my organization is doing. Shout out to them, to all of the great work that they do. I also want to give a shout out to Guilford College, where I went for undergrad, and I'll be talking more about my experience there and my civic engagement involvement at Guilford. But it really transformed my life in a way that I could, once you go to get particularly with the Bonner Scholars Program, once you are a Bonner Scholars at Guilford, it's a transformation that you cannot just get away from. So shout out to Bonner, to the Bonner Foundation. And I am currently a member of two 501c4 organizations, Fortaleza, which is a Latinx C4 organization, so similar to Poder and Si. So happy to hear that Atel has been helping them with some of their campaigns. And also I'm a board member for Equality NC, which is the oldest statewide LGBTQ organization in the country here in North Carolina. So very, very happy to be part of that team. So shout out to them in their campaign to #OutTheVote.
Go. That is amazing. Y'all are already inspiring. Okay. Wow. I love this kind of representation too of of such important leaders in our community. So thank you both for being here and also leaning into this conversation, which we were talking a little bit before the call is also, especially to be doing this live in real time and getting to know each other also in this call. It's a special moment, and it's special to be with you all, especially in a time in history where we are all feeling the weight of this pending election coming upon us, trying to figure out what is going to be our reality literally next week. It's a lot, and I'm sure I know a lot of my students are also feeling that weight, and it's maybe manifesting like stress or even anxiety a bit too. So I just want to honor that and hold space for that as we start to unpack this conversation in a very timely and also relevant fashion, but also digging into our own history in our own personal, memories of our experiences growing up in the South and that journey and also that awakening of our critical consciousness of the world around us. It's such a personal journey. So I'm just so grateful to have you both here, being willing to lean into that and share a bit about your story. And so as we start unpacking what is civic engagement, I thought the best way to start would be to kind of share our own personal journeys with civic engagement and kind of where our evolution has begun or started to shape, or kind of what were those moments for you. And maybe it was different than a moment, maybe it was people in your life, maybe it was experiences that you were having in or outside the classroom, but what was that like? And then what do you think about civic engagement now? How do you define it? So I feel like I'm just picking at random at this point to start us off, but Irving, do you want to start us off this time with this question?
So I was having fun. I knew it. But I was
Filter
prepared. I was ready for it. So I don't think, for me, civic engagement, I feel that there was a defining moment, which I'm going to share in a minute, but I think that it was always within me, if that makes sense. I have always felt the need to do something for the greater good. I have always felt the need to do mission work, right? Like, I major in accounting and French in college, but even when I first started working as an accountant right after college, and I graduated in 2008, another big recession, difficult times. I just didn't feel like going in, being on my computer, crunching numbers on the calculator, I was doing any good. But going back and thinking about this question, it seems that it was always within me to make a difference, however I could. And I guess a defining moment was in 2003 when my mom passed away of cancer. I was a senior in high school, so I told you earlier that I came in 2000 as a freshman, and then as a senior in 2003, where I was just about to feeling comfortable in my high school. Finally, after 3 years, I spoke some English. You can tell that I still have an accent 20 years later, so just imagine what it was like in 2003 or in high school. But when my mom passed, I saw just an avalanche of support from my high school, from teachers, from counselors, from classmates, just like people, just, I don't know, like how many cars I got, how many like cans of food, how many calls, how many, like there was just an avalanche of support. And they made me feel that I was cared for. They made me feel that although it was a tremendous loss in my life, someone was thinking about me, someone cared about me and my family. And for me, it was like, I need to do something. I have always wanted to do something, but since back up to that point, I couldn't, because my English was limited. But after that, I'm like, you know what? I still might not speak English fully or fluently, but I need to do something. And I started just like tutoring in my senior year to other people. I became like a big buddy for students that were first years. And when I graduated from high school in 2004, about 16 years ago, I still look good, right, Elaine? Miénteme.
Very young.
um, you know, I struggle. You know, I got here being undocumented. I am proud and shout out to all the people that get here without papers and do the hustle. And so I'm a DACA recipient, but in 2004, I know that there's still a lot of issues with access to higher education. But in 2004, there wasn't like anything, literally. The information was very, very little. People wanted to help me, but they just didn't know how. And I have to find out a lot of things on my own. I have to knock a lot of doors, which also meant that a lot of doors were like, sorry, we can't help you. Oh yeah, you can come to my college, but we just can't offer you any financial aid. There was nothing for you. All that we offer is through FAFSA, or most of it. So the little like few $1000s is not going to make it, right? So I was so fortunate to be able to make it through Guilford College, um, and graduated 4 years later. Mainly through the Bonner Scholars Program, although every single year, and I just want to take a pause here to answer a footnote. Every single year, I still needed like about $10,000 to $15,000 because Guilford is a private school. And I will apply to about 30 different scholarships yearly. Like I've always trying. So while other people were like, Dad, why you haven't sent me any money? Send me $20 or something. I was here like I was in the computer lab because I did not own a laptop or even a desktop while I was in college at all. Like I have to be in the computer lab to do my homework, my assignments, my essays. And so I was there doing researching for scholarships, doing all of these other things. And I did not get all of them. I got like maybe 5, but all of those 5s were enough to make me through the next semester, into the following semester, until I eventually graduated. But primarily the Bonner Scholars Program, which is a program, is a scholarship that gives you, a very generous scholarship, and in exchange for you to do community service. So we did at least 140 hours a semester at Guilford College, and that's when that was my first like real encounter, like intense encounter, not real, but like intense encounter with civic engagement, because I was out there in the community. I chose to do ESL tutoring to immigrants, to adult immigrants at a local library, Glenwood, shout out to Glenwood Library in Greensboro. And, I was tutoring people from Sudan, from Vietnam, from Lima, Peru, one of my favorite students. So I think that when I was there, college for me was difficult. Again, my language, my very few Latinos. And I was just looking at old college pictures, and like out of like 60 people, there were like maybe me and someone else who was Latinx, right? So it was very, very challenging. So every day, or like I'll have like a headaches or something. But as soon as I walked into the Glenwood Public Library, it just seems, and when I got out, it was like the headache was completely out. I got kind of inspired just to look at them hustling and try to make ends meet. That I'm like, look, even when I'm struggling, even when sometimes I feel bad that I do not have the family financial support, or the luxury to have even just a desktop, I'm still in college, and that's a privilege. So that privilege, Elaine, I still carry up to this day, because I know that there has been thousands of people who are undocumented, documented, who are college material, who have the potential to go to college and just simply can't because of their documentation of financial situation. So in my last year of college, I, together with Jasmine Garcia Rico, Jasmine, we founded the Soy Un Leader Conference, a conference for Latinx and now Latinx international refugee students in North Carolina, to provide those resources and information and empowerment And because we were a girlfriend, we were all so committed to civic engagement, is about how do you empower your own community as you are making your dreams come through. So I feel that as I was personally just doing that. I was making my dreams come through of being the first in my family to make it through college. That sin papeles, I was still able to do it. And I graduated in May 10, 2008 from Guilford College. And in Mexico and in some Latin American countries, that is May 10th is always Mother's Day, regardless. So it was just, for me, it was a beautiful way to celebrate the life of my mom, the impact that she has had on me, and the impact that she's having on other people through me, through her tentacles, as I will call it. So that was kind of like my first encounter with civic engagement. I want to give Axel some stage time, and then I will talk about how civic engagement has, how the definition of civic engagement has transformed and how it has shaped the rest of my professional life.
Great, thank you so much. That's such an important story, because I feel like I'm coming personally. I'm coming kind of, I guess, ahead or a few years after you. And we were talking before we started the event. We actually grew up part of our times in the same place, Alamance County, North Carolina. But yeah, like, your experience is kind of the precursor to a little bit of my experience. So I'm a DACA recipient as well, but I came in 2005, so a few years later after everyone had. And I think I like how you started, because you related it to like what personally drove you to do some of the things that you do. And I think a lot of times, either from our communities or from our families, there's like a sense of like, we do this together, right? We're doing this for each other. Or even if we talk about specifically, we have this direct immigration story. It's like, we always have this like reference, like my family, my parents, my mom, lo hicieron para nosotros. They did it for us. Even now I still get, those little snide comments. It's like, for my mom is like, even if you succeed, they're like, I still had to get you here. So she's like, yo caminé para que usted corriera, right? So, but like, we have that sense in us, right? That like, we do this for others. And I think that's where I grew up, like listening to my mom talk about, working as a young child, vendiendo tortillas, the stories of my grandmothers over there. And I actually, spent those first 7 years with her, is what kind of like started molding me as like, hey, this is what I want to do. And I remember that immigration experience. So I think in terms of civic engagement, the first connection I make is awareness, right? To some extent, I have, I don't have this like deep cultural and like patriotism towards my country, but I know my story of immigrating. And I think it gives me a sense of like person and a sense of purpose and a sense of like identity that maybe some other students don't. For example, younger sister who came here when she was 2 or 3, I think that's harder for them to identify themselves, like what their journey was. I still have that. I kept it, and I almost had like a confident like relationship with my mom, where she would share a lot of what was going on with them. So like in terms of like where I saw myself in this like U.S. society and Burlington, Alamance County, in terms of within North Carolina, that was my first kind of like connection to that. But I think a lot of it started developing as we were seeing some of the movements that went early on after I had arrived. I think I remember little tidbits of like hearing Dreamers when I was like a young kid, and like the first election stuff that I remember, like I was home myself watching it, was like the 2012 election. And I feel like that just comes to mind right now, because I remember watching those debates by myself, and my youngest sister just did that, and she's born here in the US. And it was just like insane to like just see how she also has a similar like, hey, I was born here, I'm from here, and but things matter to her, like the rest of her family, what happens. And so she sent me a Snapchat of this, and to me it was like such an impactful moment, because I'm like she's kind of following that steps, or she has that like sense of like, hey, this is important, right? So I realized that back then, because that's when all this DACA stuff had started. Took me 2 years to actually end up getting DACA, because we didn't know, right? Either issues with like not knowing whether this was actually real, whether it's going to help us, whether it was dangerous, whether it's a right lawyer. But having to go through with my mom and just dig through the paperwork, fill out all these requirements, figure everything out was kind of like what just got me this sense of like, this definitely isn't right. This definitely isn't what she was doing. And learning that like we basically had been given order of removals because we had missed court dates. Just learning that whole system for me personally, and then engaging it within high school when we had a lot of unaccompanied minors, was really what like kind of like just picked things up for me in terms of being engaged civically in a very like localized way, right? Our high schools, our communities. And before that, I guess one thing I forgot to mention is like, I also grew up in church, right? And honestly, I always forget, but like, there's a lot of credit that I should give to like having a sense of community with like Latino immigrants within that church. It's very different now, and I'm kind of a little bit removed. But honestly, a lot of my leadership developed through there. And like, I think there's a sense of like helping people, of trying to do something good. A lot of my members there, you know, were affected by the, you know, traffic stops and raids that were happening in Alamance County. So that's where a lot of it happened. And so just kind of to wrap up, education was the other huge place, right? Whether it was in high school, whether it was seeing like the effects that school was having, or the different results my sister was having as a also young immigrant kid in school, I think really kind of just started opening my eyes to like, there's so much that we could be doing here. And so I did a lot of that in high school. And once we transitioned to college, I was like, I have to do something. And that happened specifically after 2017 when they tried to rescind DACA. So we try to really rally students amongst ourselves, like you were talking, Irving, and a lot of these, especially white private institutions, like we're like a small little tidbit of people. And so I decided that like, hey, we should organize as students just to support each other and see what we could do together. And so it's been like an ongoing process. I love that it's really about like, hey, someone's doing work here. How can we plug in together? How can our stories try to inform each other's and like really build like a different narratives for Latinos here? And that's kind of part of what Miss the South is like, trying to explore this for myself, but also sharing it with others.
This is beautiful, y'all. I'm already in the chat. Just gotta share with y'all, receiving a lot of love. Okay, both of your stories being so inspiring is the word right now that's being used a lot. And I think how I'm seeing your stories also weave together. What I'm really hearing is this piece about there's this quote that I'm talking a lot to Jose, who's also watching right now, about where the quote is, "I'm not lucky, I'm loved." And that piece of what it sounds like really starting that journey of also hardship too, whether that was citizenship status or loss of a family, you know, a precious loved one, you know, like those pieces are such a tremendous shaping experience in our life. And then how our community reacts to that is really telling on whether we feel like we belong or we're cared for, we have that support. And so that piece about the nurturing that you both have also received in that journey is just really inspiring to me, especially as we think about spaces in ways that, whether it's educators, facilitators, can also nurture each other, care for each other, and then also thinking about how that turns into action, whether that's based in community involvement or also political involvement. I think as I think about my own journey, I think I felt really at times connected to my pockets of community, whether that was in church or to some extent at school, but it was hard for me to translate it to the political involvement. And I think the political involvement was hard because at the larger context, like if I thought about my city or my town, I really didn't understand how things worked. Or I didn't really understand where my role could be as a young person too, with not being eligible to vote because of being young or not being, not being of age, but also just not really seeing where my voice or maybe for me, I'm thinking maybe it comes back to representation too, just in the way of school, not really seeing my community be represented in the different political actions that were being taken, that were happening around, and just not seeing where my role could be. So that it was, for me, it was like a bit of I think college really, and it sounds like a lot of us, college also really sparked a lot of opportunity in the sense of here's a role for you to play, like here's a way for you to get involved here, you know, Irving taking the initiative to start a conference, you know, like that, those pieces of like I have experienced these challenges, I know what it's like personally, I see this need continuing to be in my community, and I'm going to move into action and take that piece. So that connecting what I've been thinking about with critical consciousness, there's these three pieces to it, and the first one is self-efficacy, like believing you have the ability and the capability to actually do something or lead or whatever it is specifically. And then that second piece about critical reflection, really thinking deeply and critically about the world around us and like what is happening in the world and how is it impacting us. And then moving into that third piece, which is when we take action, but critical action of how are we critically moving and finding our role and moving, whether that could be someone volunteering or it could be someone, you know, in your profession. There's all these different ways to get involved. And I think that's what my journey so far has been teaching me. And this next question is tying it back to Latinidad too, or Latinx identity too, as we think about our own journey and learning more about our culture and who we are, and adding that to the context of the South, which is like so nuanced. I always feel, you know, we hear a lot about the West and even the North to some extent. The South is such a unique place to be raised in. So I'm thinking about it through that lens as well. But what do you think? Or why do you think civic engagement is important to be thinking about and considering when we're talking about positive racial ethnic identity development, right? And respect specifically Latinidad or Latinx identity development too. So curious who wants to start us off with this juicy question, because it's deep and it's juicy. But let me see, should I pick randomly again? Here we go. Okay, Axel, any thoughts here? You want to start us off this time?
I think I can give a quick overview. Now I'll start with something that really hit me the other day, because I'm working with high schoolers every now and then. I'm like, hey, are you 18? You want to vote? And I mentioned earlier, we actually had a wonderful event where we had some high school volunteers. Most of them have born and raised Sampson County, been here all their life. And I'll mention why that's important in a bit. But so we had that great event, but then other students I was trying to invite, and one of the responses were like, oh yeah, I don't get involved in that stuff. And I was like, how come? And they were, she said they're all liars and they just never like keep their promises. And like, to me, it was like, it was so painful to hear that, because I'm like, yes, but, and that, I think that's fair to say, right? I think our communities have been let down over and over and over again. We're used many ways as like political, like just like, you know, pawns to be like, hey, let's trade you for this, let's trade you for that. And then on the grand scheme of things, in terms of like just community and civic engagement, in terms of being involved with your schools, being involved with like your local services, I think we're just kind of caught, especially if you're an immigrant, with you're caught with the short end on the stick, where you're just like, you get las obras, right? You get little services here and there. You have to struggle so much to come to understand it because of language. And then like, you're just not always included. And so my struggle and my reason as to why this is so important is that what's going to happen with the generation that's growing, that's either US born or just like has grown mostly in North Carolina, when they grow up with this sense of like, hey, you didn't really belong, you weren't involved, and your parents didn't mean anything or of value within like our, let's say, our state in terms of North Carolina. So like, I think that's the question that Nuestro South kind of places. It's like, how can you turn this into something that like you have ownership of? And I guess that's what I mean by, that's what civic engagement kind of like comes to me. Like, I have ownership over this issue. I have ownership over my education. I have ownership over like what happens within my local city government. I have ownership with what we do, what resources we give to our communities in terms of health. And so like, how can we do that with young folks who are coming of age and don't have a reference from their parents about what belonging and being validated by that state, country, city, whatever? I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think that's why it's important, because I think we essentially need to figure this out together throughout the next few years, or we've already been trying, like some of the work Irvin was talking about. So yeah, that's my response.
Thank you. Irving, you want to add anything?
There's so much to talk about this particular question. I'm very, very interested in it. But it reminds me of a quote by Cesar Chavez that says, "The fight is never about grapes or lettuce. It's always about people." And I think that that really resonates with me, because I think that oftentimes people who are in activism or fighting for social justice or involved civically, we can get caught up with the losses. We can get up with the struggles, with how toxic this environment can be, both physically and mentally for us. But we must not forget that we are fighting for the well-being of real people. And for me, it's about not just about leaving this world a better place than when I can, but it's making this world a place where I could thrive, like where my people could thrive. And right now, like, we have waited for so many centuries that we cannot wait any longer. So for me, being involved civically has been an avenue for both things. For one, for a personal healing. It's a journey of a personal healings. Me being connected with community kind of reminds me and centers me in. Sometimes I get really anxious, and sometimes I could trace that anxiety to certain things, right? Like the election right now and what's going to happen. Um, if Trump were to be reelected, etc. But there's often times where I cannot trace where the anxiety might be coming from, right? And it might come from different angles or multiple angles at the same time. And I feel that being involved civically kind of gives the centering piece, the healing aspect that is so important within myself and within a lot of to a lot of people who are members of historically marginalized communities. So being involved civically is it has been very, very healing. The other thing about civic engagement is, and I want to piggyback on what Atzel mentioned about las obras, so the leftovers, right? And I think that we have been taught that having las obras or the leftovers is good enough, right? So like, ah, si por lo menos tengamos licencia, si por lo menos esto, si por lo menos nos podemos casar, or, and I think that we must not, and it's so easy to do that, to fall into like just being okay with the leftovers. And I think that being involved civically has given me an avenue for self-advocacy, for advocating for my own community, and seeing that that's not enough, and seeing that I have a voice in this movement, and that while it's hard sometimes, because while we may realize it, whether it's conscious or not, um, it dawns on you and has an effect on your body and your soul, where you are one of the few queer people in the room, where you're one of the few Latinx professionals in your setting, in your organization, in your company. It really dawns on us. So being involved civically, whether it's electorally, whether it's helping a student or volunteering at a senior center, it's an avenue for our own well-being, for our own perseverance, and fighting for what you want. I mentioned earlier that I thought about civic engagement as a direct service, but now civic engagement for me is also an avenue where I could advocate for justice and fairer treatment, fairer regulations and laws. So definitely being involved politically has really been an avenue that I have taken, although I cannot vote. As I mentioned, I'm a DACA recipient, but I'm able to take my family to vote, to register them to vote, to making sure that to do all of my homework, and not only taking them and driving them to vote, but like going there with them, right? Because we know that for instance, and I'm going to share a story last year when I took my aunt to vote. She lives in her house. Um, Her house is in two different streets. So she has two houses, but in the same property. That's what I mean. Her property is in two different streets. So before she used to live in one, and then she moved to the other bigger house. So when she went and registered to vote, she mentioned that she lives now in this other house, but it's really just the same property, right? And they were not letting her register, right? So here it comes, a person that understands on English, but may not have the level that it takes, you know, because we're like, oh, okay, I cannot register. Okay, let me just go, right? But I was there and I said, no, she lives there. She still lives there. This is her house. We're not walking away until she's registered. And we got her registered. So being involved civically, whether you are documented or not, you can still be involved. You can still make a difference. And last year, in October, I make sure that there was one more vote, right? And in North Carolina, where our elections are, you know, so tight and so close, that vote, those couple of votes could make a difference. So I really urge everyone to get involved, whether, you know, find a cause that really is passionate to you, that speaks to you. For me, it's queer justice, it's immigrant justice, it's racial justice, it's access to education. And find a cause, fight for it, and find different avenues and find different ways to bring more people into the fight. And equally as important, I think that you must also preserve yourself in a way where you can thrive. So self-care is very important, and oftentimes, you know, we're not that how to prioritize ourselves. We're like, oh, someone needs in your family, like you're supposed to go, and you know, we're such a family-oriented culture, which is great. And then, like, who is there for you? You only have yourself. And so making sure that you listen to your body, whether it's yoga, whether it's listening to music, a run, a walk, whatever it is that comes and brings you healing, peace, and nurtures your soul. It's very important.
Y'all are just giving me so much life. I feel like this piece, and I'm gonna kind of weave your comments together because I'm making some connections myself. Is I think actually you mentioned earlier that feeling of ni de aquí ni de allá, like not from here, not from there, and how that feeling or the lack of feeling like you belong somewhere can also make you feel really powerless, like you don't have those connections, you don't have the, whether it's to people or to the issues or to the opportunity, to the role, you name it, right? And that feeling can be really how do you say, like it makes you less inclined to act. It makes you feel like you're stagnant. Like if you really were, you know, does your voice actually matter? Those are the doubts that start to build in your mind. And then Irving, you talking about how being involved civically has also been an avenue for healing for you and being able to advocate for yourself and others. Like that 100% resonates with me, because I feel like what we're trying to do with Latinx Ed, and then also in our own personal journeys, is move from that feeling of ni de aquí, ni de allá, and really move to soy de aquí, y soy de allá. And that looks like healing, right? To get from that, from those two spaces and those two places. And I think that there was one more piece that was really, it just hit me. See if it comes back to me. But the journey of making sure you're taking care of yourself is another really important place to start too. Is like I think back to RuPaul and all the greats that have said this before us, right? Like if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love somebody else, right? There's such a fundamental piece to start that internal healing, to then be able to really how do you say, like, I'm losing English today, but it's okay. But to really like spread that out, right? And to create positive change beyond our individual world and really take that into the community. And so I'm also seeing that self-care journey also move into collective care and how we care for each other and how we take that essence of like how we nurture ourselves and then extend that to others. It's just such a, like you said, a healing process, and makes you feel like your voice matters, or that we are, because you're not just one, you are one of many, right? Many people who are trying to mobilize and trying to change the realities of many in our communities, including ourselves. And so that it starts to feel like, I think that feeling of like, I'm a part of something bigger than myself and I can actually play a role here. And that feeling is what we're working towards, especially for our young people, to see the ways that they can engage and that their voice really does matter, and collectively, you know, can create so much change in our community. So I want to read a few comments and then we can keep going. mine too, but people are really resonating. Brian asked a question, and one that I'm thinking is a little bit more like outreach. So he said, y'all are just so full of wisdom. Amen, Brian. I wanted to ask if there are any specific ways in which you reach out to others, maybe incentives or types of events. And this is making me think of ways to inspire other people, or how have you inspired people in your journey or tried to bring people into the fold? And it can start with anybody. And I know that's a unique question too. So, or maybe it was the way that you got brought into a fold with something. So Irving, you want to start us off?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so he said, I wanted to ask if there are any specific ways in which you reach out to others, incentives or types of events. I think he's asking a little bit about getting how to get others involved, like how to inspire others to join.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question, Brian, because I think, so as I mentioned, I'm very passionate in making sure that we have, and one of the reasons why I'm passionate about electoral politics is because I want to make sure that my community, the immigrant community and the queer community know that our voice needs to be heard, right? And for politicians to really pay attention to us, right? So I just want to give the example of like Tillis, right? Who said that one of the reasons why the COVID cases in North Carolina was so high was because of the Latinx community. So blaming the Latinx community. Yes, our numbers are high, but there is a lack of critical analysis as to why our numbers are so high. So so the way that, but like he doesn't think that we're, our votes can really make a difference of whether he keeps his seat or not, right? But if we show up to the polls and say like, hey, no, we're against you, we're against that, like he's not gonna make those kind of statements, or any politicians, they're gonna think about it twice. So I think that in our community, and I tell reference to this, is like, we're kind of like, we question, right? Is it going to really make a difference, or they just want to take advantage of our votes, or they're only lies, puras mentiras, promesas, right? And for me, one way that I bring other people in, and to answer your question, is by sharing how important it is, by giving concrete examples of how important it is that you turn out and vote, right? So that we have a collective power, a collective voice. And other people just do not simply know, right? So other people may have questions or are like doubtful, but other people just might not simply know how to do that or how important it is, right? So not only sharing the importance of it and taking time to answer questions, and so the education aspect, but then also kind of like giving avenues, and like, this is what you need to register, this is what you need to do, etc. There are other ways to, like, for instance, if someone that I know that if someone I know is interested in a particular cause that I'm not as familiar with, but being involved civically also gives you the opportunity to be well connected with others, with other organizations, or community leaders that are doing that type of work, and you can connect people with them too. So just think about the wealth of resources, and sometimes it's kind of hard for us to think about that, but we must break in that mindset, and I feel that we should be thinking of ourselves as community leaders, and really just taking pride of that. Because with that, we can really move our community, the issues that are important to our community, forward. And just being the interconnector between you and someone else's can make a whole world of a difference. So I would, just to summarize it, I would say, sit down, talk to the people that you know, like bring others in. So do not exclude anyone from the conversation, because I think they can be impacted and they can be impactful to others as well. And to be a connector, a web of connectors, a power of knowledge to others, and get others involved. So as you see maybe an event that is coming together, like bring them over. And I think that could be a first good starting point.
Love that.
I'll answer real quick, and I have a great example for that. First is my example. I was sat down in 10th grade at the end of it, summer, after I came in to turn in a paper in late. It's okay. And my teacher asked me, I want you to get involved. He sat me down and he said, I think you need to do more. And the following years, when a lot of unaccompanied minors were coming to school, and it's like, kind of that just fit in there, but like there was an ask of what Erwin is mentioning. And as similar is this past weekend, one of the students, I was like, hey, you can vote. And their question was like, oh, I don't know how, I don't know what and stuff. But we took her, and then she was nervous and stuff. And we walked down through a ballot and stuff, explained some positions. Eventually, we don't have the time and resources to invest to really get a full like kind of sense for her to go to. But like we made that effort, right? And then she was like, can you come with me? And I was like, of course. I've never been in like a precinct place, but I'll go in with you too. And the most beautiful thing from that was she got like 3 other people during the course of the event. We did that early in the morning. She got like 3, maybe even 4 other people to come and do that. And she like went with them. So like that process of just one, like activating someone and then like showing them the ropes of like how they can do this for themselves is probably the best example of kind of what Irving is mentioning. And the other thing is like, I would always just be skeptical of apathy. I think there's, yes, you could be like apathetic or not care about the candidates or this, but there's always an issue that matters, right? And it doesn't have to be some big political thing. It can be something super important as to like, does your student or your sibling or your sister or anything have the resources to do school right now? And how are things going to be affecting her? It can be super simple, but I think the apathy we really have to fight back against is the mindset that Irving mentioned. And we just need to show people like, hey, you care about things. I know you have opinions. Let's talk about those. Maybe ignore the candidates, ignore like the politics of it, but let's talk about what matters to you. Period.
That's so real. And what I'm hearing with both of your answers is I think really getting down to that self-awareness piece. For me, that's kind of outreach is very much a critical action. It's also very reflective of you, right? Like, what are your skills? What are your gifts? What are your resources that you have personally? And then leaning into that power and choice to actually use them. And I think that we were talking a little bit about definitions about civic engagement, and the action itself can look so different for different people, right? Because we all have our different personalities, we have our different gifts, you know, the things that we've been working on, different strengths, and really thinking critically about what are mine, you know, what are my resources. Maybe for some of you, you are great at engaging other people and communicating. Maybe communication is your great skill. So how are you tapping into that? And it sounds like, Axel and Irving, this is definitely both of your skills, and you've been tapping into that in your community to really bring people into the fold and increase awareness, to educate, to also help people feel comfortable in that process. And for some of you out there, it might be coins. Okay, you might have the coins. So, you know, thinking about how are you sharing your resources, whether that is monetary or the other, you know, funds of knowledge that you also have to be able to share with others is another way to think about it too. And so this last question, I'm actually going to combine 2 of our last questions together. Is kind of a question of like, what do you wish people knew about civic engagement, but thinking about it from the lens of the educator, people who are facilitating, who are nurturing young people. What do you hope that they know or are acting upon or thinking about critically as they are nurturing our students? And then the flip side of, what do you wish Latinx youth in particular knew about civic engagement and its role in their identity and identity formation? And that even might be a little bit more of like a nod to your younger self. But yeah, Doug, I'm gonna condense them both since we are coming close on time. But what do you wish what people in these different audiences knew about civic engagement?
Anyone?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. All right. So I'm gonna try to summarize my thoughts because those are like very loaded questions. One, for the educators, I think that one is to know, and you know, and I think that people, just a reminder, because I think that both educators, all educators know that they're, you know, not everything works for everyone, and I think that that's important to know. And I think that not all Latinx folks are the same either, right? So whatever might work for you might not work for me either. So I don't want to generalize. What I do want to point out is that there is research that suggests that first generation students, there is a big connector to their level of identity and identity development and the level of how much they're involved in school. So high school, college, if you have kids that are well involved in the community, or if there's something that they're passionate about, like helping them find that avenue, because sometimes like we might have interest, right? But then if like, I don't know who to ask, how to get started, but then if there is some, then you cannot do it much. But if there's someone that might take an interest on them, on guiding them on like where to find more information about that or how to get involved. That could make a difference, not only in their grades or how well they do in schools, but they're in their identity development, and then also in the self of belonging in that particular school. And particularly that that it's very true for predominantly white institutions. In terms of Latinx students, particularly the younger generation, so Generation X, I think Z, sorry, I just, Generation Z. So you are so powerful, and you are at a crossroads of you are bicultural, and for those of you that are bilingual, you're bilingual, and that comes with a lot of power, strength, knowledge, wisdom that I don't even know that I fully know how to capture that on a daily basis. But being a Generation Z, and particularly those of you that were born here, you are able to vote, you are able to serve in the community. You can, although sometimes on a daily basis, it can be more days easier and more difficult than others, but you are like un pececito en el agua, like you're a fish in the ocean where you can navigate both worlds well and effectively, and you can bring those worlds to your to the benefit of your community. So know your power, know your voice, and make a difference. That will be my 3 recommendations.
Thank you, Irving. Woo, that was deep.
Dropping knowledge. That's amazing. I mean, I think I've shared or resonated some of this already in terms of educators. You can be those who are doing some of the activating, right? I think, gosh, even with me personally, right? I think I was lucky enough to like have enough resources and teachers that were helpful during school, and that was great. And at some point, like I remember even for me, like the college stuff, world history class, I had a teacher, I had just moved to Durham, and she was like, she bluntly asked me, I don't know if there's probably a better way to do this, but she's like, what's your status? And I was like, oh, I'm trying to apply for DACA right now. And she was like, okay. And then she shared that, hey, there's this other undocumented student that managed to, apply to the school, and he wasn't documented, but he was able to get full financial aid. And like, that was a seed, that was a small seed, just like the seed of like the educator, in my 10th grade saying, hey, you should get engaged beyond just classes. Like that's another like just point where I can like say, hey, that had an effect in terms of how I saw my future, how I saw my engagement, right? So being the activator, I think matters, because a lot of times I came as an immigrant, but like even the students who grew up here, I think, especially sometimes if you're in rural settings or anything like that, you're missing a lot of the context that's going on around you. Like we talk about like immigrant families and parents, like a lot of times what we're working with is like, hey, am I going to get to work the next day? Is there going to be work the next day? How can I pay this bill for this? So like our families are stuck maybe sometimes in this routine of like just survival, right? And so the question is for those that are growing up, that are young, the children of these families, then like, how can you like see yourselves beyond that? And I think this is to answer my next question. So I'm saying for educators can help students get to that point. And to answer the Latinx youth, it's a question of like, hey, being aware of the power, like Erwin was saying. So right now, about like 9 out of 10, more than 9 out of 10 Latinx folks in North Carolina under the age of 18 are US citizens. Like, so we're not some foreign group, right? Not all of us, right? It is a well-established community that's gonna like define the future of the state, but it's up to them, right? And it's up to them to be aware of that. And the way I try to also encompass it is that civic engagement is a part of everything you do within your life. It's like my role, and I've chosen my role to be like really in line with these politics, with like civic engagement, and that's my passion. But other students, like you have that whole ocean that Irvin's mentioning to actually find those interests, but just include that civic engagement within that, right? Still be an advocate, whether it is that's why I mentioned YouTube earlier, whether it's just you want to be a YouTuber, whether it is you want to like work in something else, be an engineer, like you can't exclude the context of like the background you're coming from and the community you still, in my opinion, should serve, right? But still be free, right? Find yourselves beyond this like construction of like you're an immigrant, you're Latinx, whatever that means sometimes, and then like find yourself in that and then like use that power you have.
That is beautiful, y'all. I feel like this theme of power has also kind of, been a thread through our conversation, in that piece about we are powerful. Also, knowledge is power, right? And how are we consuming and thinking critically about the world around us, and also learning about ourselves through that journey and learning about others is so, it's all connected. It's all connected. So shameless plug for any Latinx middle school, high school students in particular that are trying to get connected to, whether that's culture, whether it's to the community, whether that's to the political process or being more civically engaged, please reach out. We'd love to plug you in. There is this is an invitation to join the movement, okay? Come through. But I'm just so thankful and honored to have both of you here with us sharing your journeys. I know we're at time, so I'll go ahead and wrap us up, but thank you both. Just the wisdom, okay? People are out here in the chat too, also being really connected and feeling like it is imparting a lot of wisdom into their life. So thank you for your time. Again, stay safe because this weather is wild out here today. And also just sending you so much love and light as we kind of are in a waiting game at this point to figure out what's going to happen. But also trying to take as much critical action in this last stretch as possible. So just thank you. And I'm so honored to be in this journey with you both. So thank you for being here today.
Muchas gracias, Elaine. It was an honor. And it was great sharing the room with you at CEL.
Un placer. We got to keep going. Hopefully sometime in person.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Love it. Thank you all. And thanks to the chat. We appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. And we'll probably be commenting a little bit offline here, but appreciate y'all for showing up. It means a lot to us. And have a great rest of your day. Ciao.
Yes.
Adios.
Bye. Adios.